Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we're going to talk about a little Genestealer Cults rumour that showed up on Reddit and then appeared on Bolter and Chainsword, I believe, and someone sent it to me because they were kind of interested to see what I made of it, just because there seems to be quite a bit of discussion, not about whether the rumour is true, but the limitations that rumour would in fact apply if it was. So, this is specifically to do with Genestealer cults and the integration of Imperial Guard units, like which Imperial Guard datasheets they can take, and the actual image itself, which should be on the screen, provided I remember to edit it in, is this. It's Brood Brothers. I keep wanting to say Blood Brothers. I read it as Blood Brothers the first time I read it, and now that's all I can think, so I just end up stumbling. Brood Brothers. The following Astra Militarum datasheets can be taken as Brood Brothers. Those that are replace the regiment keyword on their datasheet in all instances with Brood Brothers. If an Astra Militarum unit does not appear on the list below, it cannot be in a Brood Brothers detachment, and so cannot have the Brood Brothers faction keyword. And then it lists the units that you can take. So, Company Commander, Tank Commander, Infantry Squad, Conscripts, Platoon Commander, Command Squad, Special Weapons Squad, Veterans, Scout Sentinels, Armoured Sentinels, Numerous Battle Tanks, and Chimera. The thing that's interesting about this is not so much whether it's accurate or not, it's some of the reactions I've seen to it and some of the comments that I've seen regarding it, because it places a limitation on what you can field under the umbrella of Genestealer cults in terms of Imperial Guard units, and there are a few notable exceptions from this list as to things that you can take. I mean, I'm not seeing anything in the way of Valkyries on there. I'm not seeing anything in the way of Baneblade or Baneblade variants. There's also no mention of the Tempesta Scions or their vehicles either, which means that there's now an actual kind of limit on what you can do, and quite a big one in a way, but it's in a way that to me actually makes sense. Also, no heavy weapon squads either, which is interesting. I mean, you can take heavy weapon squads with some of these entries, but not by themselves according to this list, if this list turns out to be correct. The thing is, when I read this, my first thought was not, oh my god, this is so harsh, this is so unfair, they should be allowed to take everything. My first thought was that it kind of makes sense. And I'm kind of surprised to see so many people declaring that it doesn't make sense, because for me, the impression that I've always got from Genestealer cults and the way they've always been presented, they have always struck me as being not like fully taking over entire regiments, not controlling vast arrays of Imperium forces through their infiltration. It's always seemed to be, local infestation, local infiltration, doing things to affect the ability of the PDF, the local planetary defence forces. It's always been presented in that when the time comes, when the Tyranid Hive fleet arrives, the Genestealer cults don't wage all-out war with the biggest and best technology the Imperium has to offer. They cause chaos and sow confusion. They start conflict before the main Hive fleet arrives, or as it's arriving. It's always seemed like they had a lesser impact than what would be implied from their ability to field Baneblades, for instance. Now, in a way, that is, I think, an important thing to try and think about. On the one hand, I kind of understand that, yeah, it's kind of cool, it's kind of awesome if you are sitting there and you've got an entire Imperial Guard force, and they are, they've fallen to Genestealer cult infiltration. They are fully corrupted, essentially. It's a cool concept and it's a cool idea, and I can see the appeal of that in terms of creating a properly thematic army. On the other hand, I keep seeing comments about things like it being an arbitrary line. It's just, oh well, they've just decided that you can't have this stuff for the sake of it. The thing is, I think that line kind of has to exist, because it doesn't take much to extend it to the point where Genestealer cults could, in theory, just be every part of the Imperium. And there also needs to be, I believe, an actual distinction between Imperial Guard and Genestealer cults. If having a Genestealer army means that you can essentially just have an entire Imperial Guard army, and also all of these lads as well, what is the actual benefit to having an Imperial Guard army? If you can just take everything that one army can take, but extra, that diminishes the impact, that diminishes the personality, and the niche of that original army. If Genestealer cults could just take everything that Astra Militarum could take, well, you would kind of be opening the door for people to just only take Genestealer cult Astra Militarum, because then you have all of these extra options on top of what you would do normally as just an Astra Militarum player. Now, I know that things like Imperial Soup exist, I know that you can ally Imperium factions together, and so you can have mixed armies already, but there is a thematic difference, there is a kind of a story difference between Imperial Guard supported by Space Marines than Imperial Guard supported by Genestealer cults. Genestealer cults are not a friendly, they're not a friendly ally to the Imperium. They are a hostile force that essentially does a hostile takeover through covert means, through infiltration. Reducing the options that they get, it might have a negative impact in terms of what you can field, but I don't think it has a negative impact in terms of what they are. It doesn't diminish the importance of Genestealer cults. I don't think it makes them less interesting. It provides a limitation that, frankly, makes them more reasonable. Because if you extend it out, okay, so Genestealer cults are able to they can infiltrate entire Imperial Guard regiments right down to their most hallowed and sacred of technology. They can field Bane blades and Shadow swords and Bane swords and any variation therein. They have access to Tempestor's Scions. They have infiltrated the most elite echelons of the Imperial Guard and also have access to all of their stuff as well. Well, at that point, wouldn't it be reasonable to say they are also good enough at what they do that they can infiltrate, for instance, Sisters of Battle, maybe? Genestealer cults, they obviously have the power, the impact, the capability to field entire Astra Militarum forces with all of their units. Surely they'd be able to do that for everything else. It would blur the line between what would be a frankly quite interesting kind of tendril of Tyranids as a whole, and just turn it into, this is a faction that can do whatever they like. They can already achieve this, so logically, why can't they achieve this as well? If they could, for instance, be able to infiltrate the Scions, well, the Scions have a ridiculous training regime. They have the full brainwashing thing going on. If they can just subvert that and do what they like with it, it's not too far of a stretch to imagine they might be able to do that to other factions as well, including Sisters of Battle. And once they're in Sisters of Battle, well, surely it would be possible for them to infiltrate other organisations on top of that, given how well Sisters of Battle are trained, which is maybe a step above Scions, which is several steps above Astra Militarum. I can kind of understand the frustration at losing access to a bunch of stuff. I can understand the frustration, especially if you've been working on an army that is Genestealer cults themed and you've already got a lot of this stuff painted up, you've already got your story written, you've already got your origins for your army planned out. But in some cases, limitation, even though it might seem arbitrary, I think can be used to draw a line in the sand. To say, yes, this faction is capable of doing this, but they're not completely capable. They are not capable of completely upsetting the balance, which is something that might become an issue. Now, obviously it won't, because it's Games Workshop who own all of this stuff and they can decide who does what, and indeed that's what they are doing. But there's a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, it's just a line in the sand, it's just drawn for no reason. It's drawn to maintain the divide, the separation between different factions and different armies. It's drawn so that you can't just go, well, they're clearly better than everything else because they could just infiltrate this and that'd be it. This actual limitation, even though it is a limitation, I don't think it's that egregious. I don't think it's that over the top. I don't think it's that severe. You are preserving the flavour of the Genestealer Cults force, making it more what it's always seemed to me, at least, to be in the fluff, which is a disruptive element, not an outright hostile, you know, half the planet has just suddenly become under the sway of the Tyranids. It keeps it grounded, it keeps it at a reasonable level for the positions that they would be able to get into before or without being detected. Gameplay wise, to be honest, I still quite like it if it's true, because again, if you can just take everything and anything from one army and then just take a completely separate force and go, and I've got these as well, and they've all got the same keywords, so off you go, I think that devalues things a little bit. Now, you can do some interesting things, you know, you can make some interesting combinations, and in terms of things like narrative play or non-tournament play, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to, if you wanted to, say this is a extreme case whereby the Genestealer Cults have done a fantastic job, and as such fight these 3 Baneblades. If your opponent says that's cool, I'm in, grand. If you can't take it to a tournament, well, you just can't take it to a tournament. There's a lot of stuff you can't take to tournaments now. I don't think limitations in this case are particularly bad. I don't think they do anything to particularly ruin an army. I don't think removing the ability for an army to just take everything from another army is something to complain about. I think it allows for an important distinction between what one force can do and what another force can do, and how far they can mesh. I don't really see what all the complaints are about. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's not a bad idea, and I think it creates that divide that frankly you kind of need every now and again. Otherwise anyone can just do anything with any force, and it kind of makes the whole plot, the whole story, the whole lore, the whole way armies are formatted kind of irrelevant, which I'm not a fan of that, you know? Question is, what do you think? Good limitation, bad limitation, doesn't really make any difference? I mean, given the actual limitations that are in place, it obviously does have an impact in terms of some of the squads you can take, but I don't think it's too awful, realistically. But you let me know in the comments below what you think. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. There's the usual things to click: videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.